Today on episode 177 of the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, we speak to culture expert Colin Ellis, and he's back with culture hacks, and he's going to tell you how you can quickly and simply improve your culture today. That's right, folks. It's all about culture today. Are you ready for this? All right, let's do it. Welcome one, welcome all to the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast, a weekly podcast series dedicated to helping you hit peak performance across the three domains of leadership. Those being leading yourself, leading your team, and leading your organization. This podcast couples my 20 years of military experience as a senior Canadian Army officer with world-class guests to bring you the most complete podcast of leadership going. And for more, feel free to check out our website at movingforwardleadership.com. And with that, let's get to the show. Yes, it is your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy, and welcome to the show. And today you're going to love it, just like every other episode, because today we got returning top shelf guest, one of the most downloaded guests of all time on the podcast here, Colin Ellis, and we're going to be talking about culture and, more importantly, easy, quick, and effective ways which you can improve your culture today. That's right, how you can improve your culture today within your organization. You see, Colin is a culture expert, and he's second time that he's been on the show. In fact, he's one of my top rated and most downloaded guests of all time. And during this episode, we go into his latest book, Culture Hacks, and we talk about things how, a leader, you can quote unquote hack your culture. Newsflash, we're not actually hacking your culture, but rather bite-sized things which you can change to improve your culture. So we talk about how meetings train your culture, a way to find trust in your team and in your culture, why failing will actually tighten your organization and not divide it, how hobbies can bring your team together, and so much more. Colin is an award-winning international speaker, best-selling author, and just an awesome guy to listen to. He's from the good old Australia, down under, so he's got that little twang to him, which for us North American folks, we enjoy, and it just makes him easy to listen to. But seriously, folks, all joking aside, you're going to love this episode. Colin and I, we have a great rapport. We have this, bond and basically friendship that made this episode just even more special, to be honest. I love having him on the show. I love interacting with him because we see things on such eye to eye, yet he puts it in a perspective which, even for me, I haven't even thought about at this time. So, you're going to get a lot out of this episode. Anyway, that's it for me. So why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation about how you can hack your culture with Colin Ellis.
Hey Scott, how are you?
Welcome to the show, buddy. Welcome back. Welcome back for round two. So I was just about to tell you this before I hit go live/record, but I wanted to save it for when we are now live. And that is, you for the longest time was the number one downloaded show on my podcast forever.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So who's gone ahead of me? Because I'm going to hunt that guy or gal down.
You might cry. Do you really want to know?
No, not really.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna eat that compliment while it's being put on a plate in front of me and go, cool, how do I beat that? Yeah.
All right. So I think you're gonna beat it now, right? because you're back better than ever with culture
better
hacks.
than ever with everything that we learned from the last year, Scott.
Awesome. I can't wait to dive in. So here's my first question for you, Colin. When you say culture hacks and the word hacks comes to me, culture, hack, the word hack to me is something that's normally cheap, easy, something you jimmy rig, all the, you see those hacks, right? It's like, oh, dad hacks, which are usually like, how to entertain your kid. You sit them on the Roomba and you send the Roomba off the vacuum, and then you sit back and watch the game with a beer. But I'm like, culture change has got to be deliberate. It's like hard. It takes forever. It takes a lot of effort, et cetera, et cetera. How do you hack culture? So your demand is going to tell me.
Yeah, that's what I was going for. Cheap shortcuts. That's my middle name, Colin Cheap Shortcut Ellis. No, I mean, yes, I get that. I think I'm using it more in a software context, in the sense that what are those little things that you can do to almost beat the system? And it's one of those things, Scott, when I kind of look back at my own career as a manager, and how and it's something I get asked a lot, when I'm doing speeches or facilitating sessions. They're like, oh, what are 3 things that we can immediately do? And I'm like, oh, change the length of your meetings. Oh, don't send email. Like real simple stuff. And they're like, dude, that's awesome. I'm like, is it awesome, or is it just something that I just decided I was going to do? So I think that's the thing with culture. Culture is a series of micro experiences, Scott. And I think often we tell ourselves a story that it's too hard. And where organizations don't have the money to throw behind a dedicated, what I would call an evolution program, then what are those little things that managers can do to actually kind of incrementally improve stuff? So that's what I mean by hacks.
That's no, don't worry. I knew you weren't going for the cheap, but I just had to throw that out there first because I knew you'd be a good sport for it. So here's a good question for you then. Would you say this is definitely geared towards those middle managers who are kind of like sandwiched, right? They have that overarching, company, corporate, whatever, but yet they're kind of like in their own little entity, their own, maybe satellite office or whatever. And they're trying to, align with, corporate culture, but at the same time, every little individual area has their own culture. So trying to like hack their way in there and make their own little, I wouldn't say empire, definitely not empire, but like their own identity within the greater identity.
Yeah, I'd say that's spot on, Scott. In Culture Fix, I talked a lot about this concept of subcultures, and I don't think we really understand the importance of subcultures. So that's every manager creating their own sense of vibrant culture to contribute to the organization's culture. Often what happens, particularly within kind of small, within medium, large corporates, is they say, this is your culture, this is what you do. And of course, the inner child in us comes out and goes, we're not going to do that. In fact, we're going to do anything but that. And so it's aimed at managers who want to demonstrate that they've got the courage to do things differently while still making sure that it lines up with what the organization is trying to do. So essentially, it's 26 kind of simple decisions, or simple, and they are simple. I never put anything in my books, Scott, that I wouldn't do myself, either as a former manager or with my clients now. And I would say at least half of them have been done by clients, even in the last kind of 18 months.
All right, so let's hit up the audience with some of these. We got 26 of them in your book. Now, obviously, we don't need to go in through all 26.
Yeah, it's got a 9-hour podcast.
I don't Joe Rogan this show. No 3-hour shows here, because the listeners got, they only got so much time.
That's right.
Right. And so I want, quality over quantity, as I say, in basically everything in life. Unfortunately, my wife wouldn't listen to me when that came to kids, and now I have 2. But the moral story, no, they're both great kids.
We have to say that, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. No, they really are great kids.
Just in case they're listening, they're never listening.
No, they should be in bed right now. All right, so let's think of the 26. Where do you think the biggest bang for the buck is coming from out of that 26? If you pick one right now that comes off the top of your head, where a leader can go, okay, I can tweak this, I can hack this right now, like Colin's saying, and I'm going to get some serious results tomorrow. Let's dive into that one.
All right. So the main one, which I think is number one in the book, is meetings, Scott, because we are
Oh,
horrible as a
preach, preach,
management. Come on, we're horrible when it comes to
do it.
meetings. We love to drain our productive time with things called back to back. The last thing we did back to back was shoot each other as a human race. Who decided that that was a good idea, having meetings butt up against each other? But we're lazy. So people are lazy. They do 30 minutes and 60 minutes because that's the Outlook default. And they just can't be bothered to change the meeting time. And so, that the first hack is around just, kind of thinking about how much time you actually need. Like 20, I always say 20 minutes and 40 minutes. If you've got 30 minutes and 60 minutes, change them all straight away to 20 minutes and 40 minutes and be really, really disciplined about how you use that time. Now, I went one step further as a manager, and I still do it now. I had an instance last week where someone booked a time to talk to me about doing a program, and I sent a meeting invite request for 47 minutes, and she wrote me back, she's like, Colin, what's this 47 minutes? I'm like, just feels like a 47-minute meeting, and I didn't start on the hour because I'm respectful of the fact she might have a meeting on the hour, and I didn't finish on the hour because she might need to get to another one. And so, I was just, again, a little bit different in thinking about the actual time I needed for a meeting. If it needs to be 5 minutes, make it 5 minutes, Scott. So that's the simplest one. And you'll be amazed how much productive time you get back in your day to do your job if you're a little bit more disciplined around meetings.
I love it. And I hate meetings. I hate meetings that are 1 hour. And I'll tell you why. Because human beings are notorious for one thing. We're notorious for filling space. And that doesn't mean that's not limited to meetings. That's all kinds of space. You buy a new house, you go in, you see that empty corner over there, you got no furniture. What do? You go to the furniture store, you end up ordering a sofa that you never sit on. Well, because it's an empty space. But the thing is, that happens in meetings too. It's like, oh, we're done in 43 minutes. Meeting was for an hour. Someone finds something to talk about. And you're just like, you're looking at your watch. You're just like, oh, come on. I got 50 million other things to do. I have absolutely nothing left to either give or, likely to receive in this meeting. Why are you sucking me dry right now? I got an interesting question for you though, because, we're recording this early mid-May 2021. We were just talking before we hit record/go live, talk about the pandemic because it's the number one thing everyone wants to talk about these days. Do you find in your role as a coach consultant that with the dispersed workplace now that these back-to-back meetings are occurring even more frequently because it's easy. You just like click a button on your computer.
Yeah. Microsoft
click a button.
Sorry, mate. Yeah, Microsoft found that as well. They are more frequent because it's easy just to click it. And what we found, Scott, is that we replicate some of the poor behaviors, particularly around things like meetings and emails. Email use has shot up during the pandemic. We just replicated that in we didn't stop. The great workplace culture said, hang on a minute, we need to go virtual. What's a bunch of stupid stuff that we do in person right now that we're not going to replicate? And they made, kind of this concerted effort. We're not going to email everyone. We're going to use chat tools. We're not going to use video conference all the time. We're going to pick up the phone and talk to people for those one-on-ones. And yet that's not most organizations. Most organizations simply replicated those behaviors. And it's easy to do. Not only that little green light showing you online became the thing, where people are like, got to show that I'm online. And so we've got this culture of presenteeism. So it's great that we're concerned about everyone's welfare, but the downside to that is presenteeism. And I got asked at a conference last week, because we can do them in Australia, just rubbing it in.
Go brag.
Yeah. I got asked, do you think people are doing less work? I said, I think the opposite is true. I think people are doing more work because they're feeling the pressure to be always on, which is not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah. So right now I work predominantly 3 days at home and 2 days in the office. And that's just really like I'm coming back into the office right now. And I tell you, like, if I notice that someone tried to get a hold to me, went to get a coffee or used the washroom, or, heaven forbid I changed the laundry or something, right? That I'm home. And I come back and I know someone tried to get hold to me. There was a message that they've been waiting for 5 minutes, or I missed a call or something. Like, oh crap, they think I'm doing nothing, right? Because that's immediately like, oh, they're home, they're slacking off, and they're watching TV or doing this or doing that. But the reality is, no, heck no. I'm like sitting like right
That's
there
right.
with my work computer. But unfortunately, that moment, you just need a hold of me. But like, how many times have you come to my desk at work and I wasn't there? And I think that's
Yeah.
the mentality that we need to adapt here and adopt here, is that, just because you can't get a hold of someone at that instant doesn't mean they're not doing anything. They're
Yeah,
doing something else.
absolutely right. Yeah, but that speaks to a lack of trust often within our workplaces. Scott, I had a guy said to me, he's like, yeah, but are people really working at home, or are they just kind of taking the, whatever? And I was just like, no, they are working from home. I was like, if you don't trust them, that speaks a lot to you and your management style. You have to be able to set expectations in a way that people understand what they need to do. And then you need to focus on the output, not necessarily where they're doing it. Now, don't get me wrong. Some work is best done and will always be best done face to face. So as soon as offices are able to be open, or wherever you are in the world, if you can go to an office, then cool. The managers need to say, we're going to meet in the office, in line with all the guidelines. But then it's about the group saying, okay, well, this work is better done face to face in this particular space, but I can do this bit at home. I think we've always wanted, we call it a hybrid work environment, right? We've always wanted the hybrid work environment. I remember working from home in 2001, and it was a preference for me. I worked from home Monday to Friday, and I had to go to London Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It was ideal, Scott, but we were only able to do it effectively and still be productive because we had a good manager who set expectations well. And as a team, we knew what we had to do when we needed to do it in order to be successful.
Now, I haven't gone fully through your book yet. Is trust in there in those 26? It's got to be in there.
Yeah, so I mentioned trust a lot because I think, one of those simple things that we don't do is actually take the time to bring the team together to talk about what we expect of each other. It's something I covered extensively in Culture Fix, is that definition of culture. Scott, and the organizations and the teams that thrived during the pandemic were the ones that said, hey, the world of work has changed, albeit temporarily. Let's come together and decide, and redefine what we expect of each other, such that we can hold each other to account if things don't go wrong, and we can celebrate that collective success of when things go right. So trust is kind of, it runs throughout the book, because what I'm trying to create is this sense of togetherness, this sense of belonging. And without that sense of belonging, it doesn't matter how many hacks you apply, your culture's never good. It's always going to be stagnant. You're never going to get off that start line, really.
Oh, that's mic drop moment right there. Wow. That's right. If you don't have that sense of belonging, you're not building that team. And reality is, culture, to me anyway, revolves around an organization, but what does the team revolve around? That's a team, and a team revolves around people and individuals. So you got to have that sense of belonging right through the whole thing in order to achieve what you're looking to achieve, which is a great high performing peak performance culture to drive that organization and hit that output as high as you possibly can. Hit hit that team at peak performance, because that's what you're looking for. So love it.
Yeah, and you know as well as I do, Scott, is you can't just throw a bunch of people together in a room and go high performance. You are high performing. Yes, we're high. That's not how high performance works. High performance starts with redefining the expectations of each other and then making sure that you achieve everything you set out to.
And to me, from a leadership standpoint, that I smell, checking your ego at the door, right? In order to achieve that, starting that ball anyway, because how do you do that? Well, you got to be open, you got to be vulnerable, you got to be humble, you got to be all these different things, which, oh, by the way, ego is the the opposite too. So
Yeah, and there's still a lot of managers who will never make it to leaders because they're carrying around a bunch of emotional baggage. And ego is part of that baggage. They're dragging it around like the heaviest suitcase. Here's me and my ego coming, and I'm going to tell you what to do. It's just like, nah. I mean, I think that's one of the good things during the pandemic is there was a little bit more vulnerability. There was definitely more empathy. And there was one survey with employees that said that they, kind of 50% of the respondents said they expected more empathy and vulnerability from leaders. Geez, that's never been expected of leaders. And so it's a real kind of sign that the world of work has definitely changed for the better.
So, no, that's wow. I asked a question about, the number one hack that you got going. We went from email or meetings to email to trust and, everything we just hit on. There's a couple, I'm looking at the list here of your books. By the way, thanks for another copy of your book.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I was actually even looking at Culture Fix today, by the way, at
Oh,
work.
awesome.
Uh, yeah, yeah. And there's a few ones that are like sticking out at me that are really interesting. I want to dive in there. Oh, we talked about honesty as
Mm.
well. Number 9, fail visibly. And I'm a fan of failure. Anyone who's listened to the show for a while knows that I'm a big fan of failure. Unfortunately, I come from an organization background where failing isn't really something you look for in a military leader. But I think in your context, it's quite different. So let's go down this route. What do you mean by fail visibly, and what does that do for our culture and bonding it together?
Well, failure represents an opportunity for learning, Scott. And when we frame it in that way, what we then do is move away from a culture of blame and admonishment and towards one of kind of evolution. The fact is that as humans, as teams, things are going to go wrong. And what we need to do is to create an environment that is safe, where everyone feels trusted. There's that trust thing again, where we recognize that, hey, you know what, from time to time, things aren't going to go your way and you're going to do something that maybe we weren't expecting. But rather than put you in a corner on a stool and getting you to face the wall, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of capture everything that went wrong and we're going to use that as an opportunity for everyone to learn from. And so, I talk very much in that particular chapter about a failure wall is, what's that place where I can go to, where I can find out the things that we've done in the past that have helped shape this team, that have helped us to grow together and learn together, but also that I don't want to remake in terms of those mistakes. And so I think, that concept, and it can be virtual. It doesn't have to be physical. It could be, the best ones I've seen are physical. They're little 3x5 cards that people write on and stick on a wall with some blue tack. And then you've got this awesome learning wall with all these things that people just get a coffee and just read all these things. And it's just a fabulous little meeting place, but it can be virtual too. And it really provides that sense of, hey, we're not perfect. We recognize that. But what we don't want to do is remake these mistakes. So what can we do to share the things that we've learned to help others in the future?
No, I absolutely love that. And I actually apply that myself on, a regular basis as a leader, right? Or one incident in particular where as the operations officer of our school is in charge of coordinating all the resources required for training. And we ran a lot of training. Let me tell you, we did something like 300 different, no, was it 300 different sessions at e-courses per year, over 3,000 students through us per year. And my little self, 6 people, we were responsible for scheduling and organizing all the required equipment and all this stuff, making square pegs fit round holes on a daily basis. Right. And one of my guys, he made a mistake. He made a pretty big mistake at the time, and we fixed it, luckily. And then I said, all right, brought everybody into what we call the bullpen area, where 4 of my people worked in this, cubicle office area. So shut the door, said, all right, after action review, let's go through this. What happened, why it happened, what the mistake was. And I said, listen, this is not me calling you out publicly. Everyone here needs to learn this mistake and know how to avoid it in the future, because they may slip into your seat at any moment if you're out for the day or week or whatever, and to be able to do your job. Because guess what? It don't stop. Right. Things don't stop, right? The work still keeps going regardless, and we need to keep up on top of it. And we did that on a regular basis.
And I think as well, for any team to achieve results, it has to take risk, Scott. And so what you want to do is to create an environment where people are comfortable taking risk. And if there's a blame culture for every mistake that's made, they're never going to be comfortable. They're always going to wait for permission to do things. And as a result, the culture will stagnate and you'll end up missing targets left, right, and center.
Well, then, the secondary effects I look at as well. Then initiative goes down, and innovation goes down, motivation goes down, retention goes down. Oh, turnover goes up through the roof, right? Because people are like, hey, I don't like this place. I don't belong here. I'm popping smoke. I'm pulling pin. I'm getting out of here. And heading over to the competition because they got an opening, and I like what I see and what I hear. right?
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
So love it. Failing visibly. And this is something I think a lot of senior leaders out there, like I'm talking like senior board level C-suite leaders. I think this is something that they need to actually do more. I think they need to own that a bit more and be a bit more transparent there, because I'm not seeing from my standpoint, I don't see a whole ton of it. And I think we could, people could definitely do better with that, but that could be a conversation for another day. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and I think it's as simple as a senior leader sharing a very human moment, and that's that
Yeah.
vulnerability you talked to earlier, Scott. Is what's one thing that you've learned in your career that you can pass on to someone else? Employees love that stuff. They
Heck
love
yeah.
that.
Hell
Yeah.
yeah. One that's really sticking out is interesting to me is number 11, hold a hobby expo. So a little interesting side story. So we were actually when we had one, Tuesday here. This is recorded on a Tuesday. Tuesday for me at work is meeting day. Go back to what we talked about earlier, right? Like today was 2.5 hours of my day gone of meetings. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, some of it is very worthwhile, but I think we could tighten up some things as well. But in one of those meetings, I talked about this because we were talking about culture in that meeting. And I said, hey, if you're interested, and I fired the link out, and, there's people watching right now, and I don't know, hi guys from work, if anyone's watching from work.
Hey,
But
from
it's
Scott to work.
First Canadian Division headquarters right there. So, but the interesting thing is, I haven't, I said, like, not many people know this about me at work because I don't talk about my podcasting side that often.
Mhm.
And I talked about, having you on because we were talking about culture and stuff like this. So what's the premise behind holding a hobby expo in regards to an organizational culture? Because I find that very intriguing.
So this is to strengthen the connection between individuals. It's something that the late Tony Hsieh used to talk about a lot. Tony Hsieh used to be the CEO of Zappos, he died recently. And he talked about the fact that they believed in social integration, not social separation. And I had the pleasure of speaking to him back in 2019, and he said, what we do is look for ways to bring the outside in, which I love that. And something that I used to do with my teams is if anyone ever had an interest, something that they did outside of work, and we kind of got wind of it, we would ask them to talk about it. So what we would do is we would kind of either do a bit of a round table, or else we would get people to bring stuff in to share, just like you did with your podcast. What are those interests that you have? So some guy was really interested in fishing, so we went on a fishing trip. Like, I'm not a fisher, it's just not something it's not something you tend to do in the middle of Liverpool when you're growing up. And so we all went fishing, and it was really awesome, and he got to tell us about stuff and all of that. And so it's a way to kind of share your interests with other people that strengthens the connections between them and that sense of belonging, because we all have a life outside work, Scott, and we're all interested in something. And so, it's a way of encouraging interest in other in people's lives outside work. And it can be a whole lot of fun. It really, really can.
That's awesome. I often talk about building high performing teams starts with nothing to do with work. And to me, this just amplifies that, right? And once you build that high performing team, guess what? Your culture is going to exude that. As new people come in, they're like, "Hey, what the heck's going on? Oh yeah, we get this hobby expo." Like, hobby expo, what the heck is that? Well, this is what we do here. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Right. And it just exudes that, togetherness, that bonding, and all that, those types of things, which guess what is needed for those high performing teams. Because when people feel connected, that's when they go to bat for each other. That's when they go, I got your back, regardless. I will, I'll work those extra hours. I'll take on that task load because you got something going on that, is distracting away from you, your ability to operate at 100%. Because I know when it's my turn and when I'm in the same situation, you got my back and you're going to take care of me. And that's what you need. But it starts from knowing each other on that more intimate level, and things outside of work. So that hobby expo is a fantastic idea.
Well, I do kind of a team workshop, a culture building workshop, Scott, and I do 2 day in person or kind of over 4 days virtually. Whenever I ask people what's their favorite part of it, because I always include the hobby expo in it, and I talk about bring some information on something that you do that you don't think anybody else does. And like the immediate response is I don't do anything, but somebody always does something. It doesn't matter whether they go hiking at the weekend or whatever it is that it's always people's favorite part. Not that the rest of it's rubbish, but they get to really learn about the people that they work with. They see a side of them that they've never seen before. And everything that you just said stems from that kind of knowledge and having empathy for someone else.
So we're kind of dovetail into which shocks me is here. And that could be pop up in the Hobby Expo, and let's start a podcast. This is amazing. You have start a podcast as part of the culture. I have so many thoughts in my head right now, but I want, the person who wrote the book literally to tell me, how starting a podcast can help a company's culture.
For the simple reason, Scott, that the best ideas for evolving a culture, the best ideas for enhancing business value live within an organization right now. What many organizations don't do is create an environment to bring them out, either running a hackathon, which is another one of the hacks, which is a simple innovation session, or else by sitting down and interviewing people and getting them to share their knowledge. And the thing was, Scott, and you've been doing this for a while, is podcasting used to be way more difficult than it is now. Like you used to have all of the bells and all of the whistles, and it cost $1,000 just to get started. And now it's pretty straightforward, not to demean the work that you're doing. Obviously, you make it look easy. But you know what I mean in terms of setup costs. There's really not a lot to it. And I think, and I've appeared on a number of corporate podcasts. Every time I work with someone, they're like, oh, would you mind being interviewed for our podcast? I'm like, of course. Some of those stories from the front line, it's a great way to find out what other people do in other divisions, particularly those organizations. I worked with one organization, I encouraged them to do it because they had a lot of silos. I'm like, there's no better way to break down the silos than interviewing someone for 20 minutes on the job that they do, the challenges they face and the opportunities that they have. So again, it really builds that sense of togetherness, but crucially understanding for what other people have to do on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely amazing. I see just you've hit a home run already, but starting a podcast, how senior leaders, especially in like really big organizations, right? I work for the Canadian Armed Forces as my day job. We're, around the globe, 100,000 people, you don't want to talk with stovepipes and different subcultures. We have it all, right? And what amazing tool for the senior leadership to be able to promote, their ideas, to be able to pass their vision in a really intimate way, which is not necessarily being leveraged that much right now, I believe, at that corporate level. Because people more see podcasting how we're doing podcasting right now, i.e., a couple of people that are not, we have a relationship because you've been on the show before, but that's about it. So it's like an interview, and obviously there's business behind my show and all this stuff, but not for that internal communication. And I'm going to dovetail quickly to say the great time for me to announce that actually not too long ago, I've released a how to podcast course, a podcast for your business course, which takes you from not having anything smack of how to do anything to completely planning your show, to setting up your equipment, to, like Colin said, not spend those thousands of dollars, because guess what? $100 microphone is all you need this day and age, and you're good to go. And how to actually produce your show yourself professionally and not spend a crap ton of money, because I'd be honest, like I do all my production, and the people out there, I've looked at the rates because I was thinking about offloading it. They're just fleecing us, like, to be honest. Now I understand they got to eat, but they're fleecing you. So record your show, set it up, plan it, execute it, and automate, and everything else in between. So if you're interested in that, just links can be in the show notes. But podcasting for your business, $299 US, and check it out at scottmccarthy.co/PFYB for podcasting for your business. So that just slid right in there
Slid
nicely.
lovely in
And this
there,
is something
yeah.
that's and this is something super new that I've just actually released 10 days ago. So
Cool.
that's
That's
awesome.
awesome.
But honestly, I did that because I believe in the power of the medium. I wouldn't have been doing this for 5.5 years now because if I didn't believe in the power of medium, both from from a business standpoint, but even from a leadership standpoint, to be able to connect with your people, especially if you're big, large corporations that are dispersed. The problem with those corporate emails these days, no one reads them because they're just so flat and dry, and you feel like they've been vetted by 50 lawyers before they come out. You don't get any of that texture from the leader of what they're saying. So obviously it depends on the leader. Some of them just do their own thing. But I think with a podcast where people can listen to the voice of the leader and their passion behind a particular topic, you can really connect with your people a hell lot better than those mass emails.
It's so true, and
So
I
amazing.
think as well, Scott, is there's this inference that if they send an email out, that's all people need, but that's only one method of communication. I spoke to a CEO at the start of the
100%.
pandemic, and he was like, "I'm not comfortable on video. What should I do?" I'm like, "Get comfortable on video, because people want to see you.
Do more video.
Yeah, do more video, or do a podcast, do some audio, because people want to hear your stories.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. That's fantastic, and I think this is somewhere where it's being underutilized right now, and you can really make a difference and make. I wouldn't say make a splash or make a scene, but you can definitely make some chatter amongst your people. And like you said, it's just another medium because guess what? Not everyone's going to listen to it, but maybe people will read the email that I don't enjoy reading. All right. So at least then it's another, net in the water of passing, catching people to pass your message to them. So I think it's a fantastic idea. I think it's a great way to grab that culture anyway, I've said it all. All right, let's dive into one more, and this is something interesting that I see all the time. So I know the benefits to it, but I don't know if it happens I don't believe this whole happens in corporate a lot, and that is interdepartmental sports day. So like in the military, so the context is this: like in the military, obviously we're highly competitive A-type personalities, right? and we enjoy sports, that competition. Like I'm serious, I've seen people from the same unit, i.e. small organization, like I remember being in Kandahar, Afghanistan, and we had two ball hockey teams from my unit, and we would play each other. And the rivalry was going all day to the point where, like, you'd almost get scared someone's going to get hurt. Not in combat, but on the ball hockey court. But I'm interested to your take from more of a corporate side of why is this so great for culture and bringing people together and all those things.
Well, again, Scott, I mean, these are born from my own experiences. I know that I got to know other people from other departments through simple little events. One of the things that I used to do is we used to have innovation time on a Friday between 3 and 5 o'clock. And at 5 o'clock, we would take a rounder's bat or a baseball bat, and you'd have to hit the ball. Every time you hit the ball, you had to come up with an idea. You'd run the bases, right? And so word got out about these kind of little events, and other people wanted to join. And of course, then it became a competition. Then you had teams versus teams, and essentially we'd do our innovation, and then we'd have interdepartmental sports. But it doesn't have to be outdoor sports. It doesn't have to be physical. It can be kind of a chess competition. It can be a fantasy football ladder. I think anything where you're inviting a little bit of healthy competition. I think often we forget in our cultures, our job is there to really perform to our highest level. And I think if you can kind of stimulate that motivation in other ways other than just around the work, all it can do is enhance that. And so, as a former football player, soccer player, football player, I always used to partake in kind of my company's team sports. And then we would always encourage other sports with the element on fun. You don't want to turn it into, a kind of episode of The Office where we're so aggressively, kind of competitive that it ruins everything. But it's just a fun way to spend some time with other people in a way that, creates a different level of energy. But you do, exactly as you say, you get to see a different kind of motivation, which is always going to be beneficial towards results achievement.
No, it's awesome for sure. We always find sports just makes teams bond tighter together. It's just that that competition aspect, and like you said, it doesn't actually have to be hockey for us, rugby for you, or down under. It can be a fantasy league. It could be esports this day and age. Who knows?
That's right.
Or a friendly competition. Right now, we have a friendly fitness competition going on where we have teams and stuff like this, and it's because you can't do a whole lot together. It's individual, but you still have that team aspect where you're like, oh, I gotta get up, I gotta get my workout in because it counts as points, and if I don't do it, I'm gonna let my team down. Exact same type of atmosphere, but in more of an individualized area. But still,
That's right.
It helps bring people together.
Steps challenges have been really, really popular as team sports, and there've been little ladders, certainly down here when we were locked down last year, Scott, trying to be the team that does the most steps because we were allowed out for 1 hour a day.
Right.
And kind of, how much energy people put into it is fabulous.
That's awesome, Colin. Colin, man, it's always been fantastic having you on the show. We need to do this more often. Before we wrap up there, you got actually a last question. So a lot of people are like, could be listening to this, like, oh, how is this culture? You're talking about, having a podcast and talking about sports, and we talked a bit about trust and reducing meetings and all this stuff. What would you say to, I would say maybe the cynical listener out there, say, how is this actually relates to culture? Isn't culture, values and overarching organization feel and vibe and all this stuff? What would you say to that person?
Well, I would say that culture is the sum of everyone's attitudes, beliefs, behaviors, traditions, skills, and stories. And if you're not taking meaningful action to enhance those stories and to create those different experiences, then your culture will never evolve from kind of that stagnant, pleasant space to vibrant. And vibrant is where the magic happens. And just by a few well-placed little hacks, you can transform everything.
Beautiful. Love it. All right. Last couple questions for you. Let's see if you remember. I'm going to compare notes because I'm still asking you this. According to you, Colin Ellis, what makes a great leader?
A great leader is someone who's humble, empathetic, vulnerable, and puts himself in service to others, Scott.
And for the listener, if you want to compare notes, feel free to go to movingforwardleadership.com/109, because that's the last time Colin was on the show. I asked all the guests here that question. And the final question of the show is, how can people find you? How can they follow you? Feel free. Shameless plugs are allowed. It's all about you right now.
You can find my books on Amazon. Colin D Ellis is my author name. You can find me on LinkedIn at the same, or otherwise you can head to my website, colindellis.com. Oh, I should also plug, I've got a community, Scott. I've got a virtual community for anybody who's interested in building and creating great workplace culture, and that's culturemakers.community.
Awesome. And for you all, the links are in the show notes. It's easy as always. Go to movingforwardleadership.com/177. Call my man. Thank you again. Thanks for coming.
Always a pleasure, Scott. Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Thank you, mate.
And that's a wrap for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the Peak Performance Leadership Podcast. But you know what you could do to truly support the podcast? And no, that's not leaving a rating and review. It's simply helping a friend. And that is helping a friend by sharing this episode with them if you think this would resonate with them and help them elevate their performance level, whether that's within themselves, their teams, or their organization. So do that. Help me, help a friend. Win-win all around. And hey, you look like a great friend at the same time. So just hit that little share button on your app, and then feel free to fire this episode to anyone that you feel would benefit from it. Finally, there's always more. There's always more lessons around being the highest performing leader that you can possibly be, whether that's for yourself, your team, or your organization. So why don't you subscribe? Subscribe to the show via movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. And until next time, lead, don't boss, and thanks for coming out. Take care now.